So here's all our boards with the ceiling on the bottom, the white one. They turned out beautiful. I mean, they're all nice and glossy, look like glass. Look at the grain coming out in that. And the red one, beautiful. So we're going to go to sealing the top. I noticed that the red one didn't have any Envision logo on it, so I put that on in the meantime. And I allowed something to happen just to give you an idea of what you can do if this does happen. So some beads of this bottom ceiling did come over here. I'm going to sand that off with the 150 grit. On one of the holes that I taped off, I didn't push the tape down very hard, so a little bit of resin came there. I'm going to sand that off, retouch the red paint, and get these all ready for sealing the top. This one turned out great. I think I might have a little spot there that really doesn't even need sanding. In contrast, the 32-inch board turned out perfect. I took a little more time with it. It was slow on the edges to get that, and I wiped the edges good. There wasn't anything to do left on the top because none of the resin came over there. If you ever feel like that's going to be a problem and you just don't want to deal with sanding, one thing that I do occasionally is just I run a string of tape along the edge, just like that. I'll go all the way around the board and push it down. That way if the resin happens to get on there, all you do is pull that off and the resin comes off with it. So I used to do that on almost every time, but I've gotten to the point where I can do the edges without getting the beading to come down. So when you go to seal the top, you could also run the tape along the bottom here if you just don't want to take the chance of getting extra resin on the bottom here. And it's just take the time to run it right along that edge, go all the way around. That way when the top is cured and dried, you just pull this off. If there was any excess paint or resin, it would just come off with it. So I'm going to prepare all these for the top ceiling, which will be sanding those few little beads off, fixing that little spot where the resin came through the hole, and there's nothing I have to do to the short one, so it's ready to seal. And then when I come back, I'll be ready to seal the boards. Okay, so I got a little bit of beading sanded off on these edges and sanded down that hole and touched up that red paint. And I take the bottom holes like the top so we don't get that bead of resin coming through, especially now that we have the bottom done. We don't want it on there. And I'm going to start with this 38-inch board and get it sealed on the top, and that's the one we'll demonstrate, and then we'll move on to the others. One thing I'll mention is that, and when we get to the point where we put grip in there, I have sand to put right into the resin. On the small board, what I'm going to do is seal it, and then I'm going to use grip tape on the top of that one instead of the sand, so we can show you both ways. Okay, quickly, I want to show the measuring of the resin again. I'm not going to use, I have a little bit more than half of my resin left. What you get in a kit is more than enough to do the boards. So I'm not going to use the entire amount. On the top, you really don't want to puddle at all for sure. You want to get that resin spread really evenly, and the reason is because when you put sand in, if you have a puddle, the sand kind of disappears into it. If you're just going to do grip tape, no big deal, but I'm going to use sand on this one and show how that's done. So there's my resin. Match it up with the hardener. If you do err on the side of how much resin you're putting in, err on the side of too much hardener. But don't put too much hardener. That's not like an indication that that's what you should do. It's just that if you don't have enough hardener, it's worse than if you have too much, a little bit too much. So there we have it, hardener and so we'll mix those and then I'll move on into sealing. Okay, here we go. We got the resin all mixed up for this 38-inch board. Pull the cover off of my brush. This is your second brush from your kit. Now when you do this final coat on the top, you don't have to use all the resin. In fact, there's a good chance you won't. So I'm not going to pour it all out right now. Because the way this has a little concave, the resin will want to kind of go in there, and we don't want that to puddle up in there because it'll make it harder for us to do the sand. So we do the same thing we did on the bottom. I'm going to concentrate on trying to get that resin out of the center there so that we don't have a puddle of it. Okay, I have this board mostly covered. Again, I'm going to try to keep that puddle out from the center there, and I can actually take and put more of this resin if I feel there's too much in the center out and put it back in the cup. Because again, we don't want any puddling up. It will take away from our grip. Because we had already had a coat on the side, I just did a very light coat on the side. Just kind of barely went over it since it's already covered. So we'll do the final back and forth. I think I've got a good coat without it puddling in the middle there. Get a good, slow. So the next thing we're going to do is we're going to add the grip, which is just going to be sand, decorative sand that you get at the craft store. And that's what we're going to put in here for grip. And it may sound like it gets sandpaper, but the way the resin kind of soaks it up, it's just perfect. It just reminds me almost exactly of grip tape. And I just got this cheap little plastic shaker, and I have the decorative sand in there. You could use an old salt shaker or whatever, and just start shaking it in there. Try not to get too much right on the edge if you don't like to get it on the edge of the board. Now if the sand disappears into the resin, that means you may have left too much resin on there. So on the top, just seal it. Don't get too much resin. Because I have had boards where I put too much resin and the sand pretty much disappears in there and I don't even have any grip really. So that's that board. It is done. And the next thing we'll be doing on this one is drilling the holes and get ready for the trucks and wheels. Alright, I'm going to do the long board 42-inch and the 32-inch kicktail at the same time. So I've got the resin all mixed up for both of them already. I can show you this from the 32-inch board. I still had some resin left. Didn't need to use it all, and I didn't want to use it all and have it puddle up on there. The other thing I can show you is even from the long board is I had resin left in my thing. So I just wanted to mention that there's more than enough to do the boards, plus to do some surfboard laminate paper if you so choose. So there's plenty of resin, and if you have a little bit left, you can save it for another project. So we'll start with the long board here. Again, I'm not going to stick all that resin on to begin with. Well, the other thing I wanted to mention is when I put this logo on this surfboard paper on the red as opposed to the white, if you'll notice the black shows up fine and the brown and everything, and even an outline of the eyeball, but the lighter colors on a design will disappear right into the darker colors on a board. So I like to use, that's why I like to use the white color on when I use the laminate paper. So I'm going to be spreading this around. You can see all the imperfections just disappear. All that discoloration just goes away when we get that. My surfboard laminate paper is just disappearing into there, and it's going to be a beautiful finish. And the tops are actually quite forgiving because, for one, you put sand on the ones that you want to put sand on for grip. The other ones that you put clear grip tape over, it's also going to cover up a lot of the imperfections if you end up with any. So we'll come back when I get most of this resin spread on. So here's our final two boards done. You can still see the edge of this surf laminate paper. If I was to put grip of sand on this board, it would cover that edge up, and so it would blend in really nicely. You can see it here a little bit too, and so the sand will do that. The one thing I didn't mention with the other board is that even though I go very lightly on the edges, I still like to run a paper towel along here just to make sure I don't get any beading up, and even up onto the edge a little bit, because I do not want to have to deal with that later. The other remedy is just to tape it all off. And then you'll pull that off. So I'm going to finish wiping off these edges and then add the sand to the long board, and then I'll finish up. Alright, so here's our three boards all done. These were the ones we started from just a blank, sanding, then adding graphics, sealing the bottom, then sealing the top, and adding the grip into the top where we want to. In the case with the short board, I'm going to use some clear grip tape on that, and I'll show you what that looks like when that's done. So the next stage is to clear the holes out, because during the process of sealing, they got some resin in them. We're going to clear the hardware holes out, prepare to put the wheels and trucks on, and I'm going to show you the two options for keeping the bottom either glossy, just as it is, which is nice, or sanding the bottom and giving it a sanded finish. And I'll tell you the different reasons why I would do that. So that's it, and we'll move on to the next step.